Here is a contradiction that shaped where almost everybody lives. A river is the best road you have, and it is also the worst wall you have. Going downstream is free. You load a raft, you push off, and the water does the work for 100 kilometers. No animals to feed, no wheels to break, no road to maintain. Which is why the oldest cities in the world sit on rivers, and why so much of what we have talked about in this series moved on water. But turn 90 degrees, and the same river stops you completely. And people badly underestimate how serious that is, because a river does not look dangerous. Moving water is heavier than it looks. Knee-deep water flowing quickly will take an adult off their feet. It is cold, which takes your strength faster than you expect. It hides its own depth, and it hides what is on the bottom. And the bottom moves. A crossing that was safe last spring may not be safe this one. In medieval English coroners' records, drowning is one of the commonest accidental deaths. Not in shipwrecks, in ditches, mill ponds, fords, and streams. Ordinary water on ordinary days. So the river is a road that runs the wrong way, and everything in this episode is people negotiating that. And the first solution is not a boat, and it is not a bridge. It is finding the one place where the river is briefly weak. A ford is a very specific accident of geology. You need it shallow. You need the bottom firm rather than mud. You need banks low enough to get a car down and up again, and you need the current slow. All four at once, and not many places have that. So where one exists, everything bends towards it. The paths on both sides curve to meet at that point because there is no reason to arrive anywhere else. And once every road within 100 kilometers is pointing at the same patch of gravel, people start meeting there, and they start meeting there regularly. And where people meet regularly, somebody sells them something. And then somebody builds an inn, and then a church. So the town is not built beside the river. The town is built on the river's weakness. And you can read this straight off a map, because the names never got changed. Oxford is the ford where you could get oxen across. Frankfurt is the ford of the Franks. Hertford is the hart's ford, the deer crossing. And in Greek, the Bosphorus means roughly the ox passage. The same idea, 2,000 kilometers away. Those are not poetic names. They are directions. They're the most useful thing anybody could have written down about that place. Now, if there is no ford, you have to float. And the simplest float is a log, which people use for a very long time, and which is genuinely dangerous because a round log rolls. So you hollow it out. A dugout canoe is stable because the weight is low and the flat inside stops it turning over. We looked at those in the episode on crossing the sea, where the problem was open water. On a river, the problem is different, and it is not the width. The problem is upstream. Because floating down a river is easy and floating up one is close to impossible. So every river craft has to answer the same question. What happens at the far end? And the answers people came up with are wonderfully unsentimental. On the Tigris and the Euphrates, they built round boats, genuinely circular like a floating basket. A frame of willow, covered in animal skins and waterproofed with bitumen, which seeps naturally out of the ground in that region, so it costs nothing but the gathering. And round is not a mistake. A round boat cannot be steered well, and does not need to be, because it is going wherever the current goes. It spins as it drifts, and nobody minds because forward is not a direction that matters. Herodotus describes these, and he describes the part that makes the whole system work. Each boat carried a donkey. Because at the far end, you sell the cargo, you break up the boat and sell the timber, and you fold up the skins. And you load the skins onto the donkey, and you walk home upstream. The boat is disposable. The donkey is the return ticket. That is not a primitive arrangement. That is somebody who has thought carefully about the whole round trip and priced it. And there's an even simpler version, which is startling the first time you see on a wall carving. Assyrian reliefs show soldiers crossing a river lying on inflated animal skins, kicking. A whole sheepskin, sewn shut, blown up through one leg. And you have a float that weighs almost nothing, costs nothing, and packs flat. Scale that up, and you get a raft called a kolek, a wooden platform sitting on dozens of inflated skins. It carries an enormous load downstream, and at the destination you dismantle the platform, let the air out, and carry the skins back. The same logic again. Build something that is easy to unbuild. Now, what if you need a whole army across, and you need it this week? Then you stop trying to cross the river, and you make the river underground. In 480 BC, Xerxes wanted a Persian army from Asia into Europe over the Hellespont. So his engineers moored 2 long lines of ships side by side across the strait, hundreds of them anchored against the current. They stretched enormous cables along the lines, one set of flax and one of papyrus, and tightened them with winches until the whole thing was rigid. Then planks across, brushwood on top, then earth. Then a fence along each side, high enough that the animals could not see the water and panic. It is a road. He built a temporary road out of boats. Herodotus says the first attempt was destroyed by a storm, and that Xerxes had the engineers beheaded, and then had the sea itself given 300 lashes and a set of fetters thrown into it for disobedience. That is Herodotus telling a story about a foreign king, so hold it loosely. But the bridge is real, and the method is well attested. The Romans made the same move at speed. Caesar wanted to cross the Rhine to make a point. His engineers built a timber trestle bridge across a wide, fast, deep river in about 10 days. He marched the army over, spent about 18 days on the far bank, marched back, and then pulled the bridge down behind him. Which tells you the bridge was never about transport. It was a sentence written in wood, and the sentence was, "We can come over here whenever we like." Now, the other direction entirely, and my favorite structure in this episode. Go to the Andes. The Inca road system ran for thousands of kilometers through some of the steepest country on Earth. No wheels, because wheels are useless there. No arches, no iron. And gorges everywhere, hundreds of meters deep, with a river at the bottom. So they wove bridges out of grass. Long cables, each one made by twisting together thinner ropes, which are made by twisting together thinner ropes still out of a tough mountain grass. 6 cables, for to walk on, 2 as handrails, anchored into stone abutments on each side. And grass rots, which is the entire point. The bridge has to be rebuilt roughly every year, and one of them still is. It is called the Keswachika, over the Alperimac, and every June the surrounding communities come and rebuild it. Each household brings a length of braided grass rope, made at home, to an agreed thickness. Those are twisted into the big cables, the old bridge is cut and dropped into the river, and the new one is built across in about 3 days. And then there is a festival, because of course there is, which is the same lesson as the episode on moving giant stones, arriving from a completely different direction. That bridge is not really a structure. It is an obligation, renewed annually, that happens to take the shape of a bridge. If the community stops turning up, the bridge is gone in a season. The engineering is the community. Now, permanence, which is a different problem entirely and much harder than people assume. Because here is the thing that surprises everybody. The difficult part of a bridge is not the span. Spanning a gap is a solved problem. Rope, timber, and arch, anything. The difficult part is the bit you cannot see, which is standing a foundation in moving water. You cannot dig underwater. You cannot see what you are doing. The current takes away whatever you put down. And the river is scouring the riverbed constantly, so the ground you are building on is being removed while you build on it. The Roman answer to this is one of the great pieces of practical engineering, and it is very simple. You drive a ring of wooden piles into the riverbed, forming a closed circle around where you want your pier. You pack the gaps with clay, so it is roughly watertight. That is a cofferdam. Then you bail it out. Slaves, buckets, and screw pumps for as long as it takes. And now you have a dry hole in the middle of a river, and you can build in it as if you were on land. They also had a material that is close to cheating. Roman concrete, made with volcanic ash sets underwater. It does not need to dry. It cures chemically, wet, which means you can pour a foundation into the sea or a riverbed and it will harden there. Then the arch on top, which turns the load in a sideways push, carried down through the piers. And a pointed cutwater on the upstream side of every pier to split the flow and shed ice and floating timber. But even done properly, the piers cause the next problem. Because a row of piers narrows the channel, and narrowing a channel speeds the water up. At Old London Bridge, the obstruction was so bad that the water dropped noticeably between one side and the other and ran through the gaps like rapids. Boatmen called going through it shooting the bridge, and it killed people regularly. Sensible passengers got out and walked around. And the faster water digs at the foundations, which is called scour, and it is still today one of the commonest reasons bridges fall down. The bridge creates the current that attacks the bridge. Now the honest part, because this record is more biased than most. Almost everything in this episode is the expensive version. Stone survives, and stone gets written about. What we barely see is how most people crossed most rivers on most days, which was by wading, swimming, or paying somebody with a boat. A ferry leaves no ruin. A wooden footbridge rots. A rope across a stream leaves nothing at all. So the archaeological record of river crossing is heavily weighted towards the permanent, the state-funded, and the grand. And the last thing, which is why bridges feel so loaded. A bridge is not only a piece of engineering. It is a choke point that somebody owns. Whoever holds the crossing controls the road and can charge for it and can close it, which is why so many old bridges have a gate tower on them and a toll house and very often a chapel. Because you would like the traveler to pay, and you would also like them to pray for the soul of whoever paid for the bridge. So put the whole thing together. The river gave you free transport in one direction and a wall in the other. You found the fords, and you built your towns on them, and you named the towns after them, and the names are still there. You made boats designed to be destroyed at the far end, and sent the donkey home with the skins. You made roads out of ships and bridges out of grass that had to be rebuilt every single year. And when you finally wanted one that would last, the hard part was never the beautiful arch over the water. It was the invisible thing underneath it, built inside a wooden box in the dark by people bailing.